Welcome to a recap of Game 3 of the match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. And now Nepomniachtchi was white, and they repeated the opening. They played Ruy Lopez. But it was different from the Game 1. In sense that after castling, now Jan played a4. In the Game 1, h3 was played, and after knight a5, Black sacrificed the pawn for a bishop pair. You can check that in the playlist, a World Championship match 2021. Instead, he went for a4, and we get the normal Ruy Lopez position. Bishop b7, d3, and now d6. The pawn on e5 gets defended, unlike in the Game 1. Now knight d2, the knight goes to f1 and g3 or e3, depending what white wants. Rook e8, and now knight f1. Now h6 by black, and here bishop d2. This is played because white wants to go rook c1 at some point and to push c4 even. So black goes back to f8, tries to put more control over e5 and also to prepare pushing d5. So white plays knight e3 to stop d5 and also prepares c4. Black goes knight e7, trying to reroute his knight and also to stop knight d5 or knight f5 by white. Now c4. Now the idea is that Magnus took, and now knight c4. Now the knight goes to a5, and it would be very unpleasant if black allowed this. So black goes back to c6, trying to stop knight a5, because now if after this bishop a5, I think after queen d7 black is doing fine, and he might even push c5 next. The position is okay. So after this he plays rook c1. Now knight a5 is a very nice threat. If black just ignores this by playing g6, let's say, then white goes knight a5, takes, and puts some pressure on the c7 pawn, which is not very pleasant. So instead he plays a5. Also to mention that white's idea was also maybe to play bishop a2 and b4 to start putting pressure on the queen side. So by a5 he's fixing the b pawn, he's denying white from playing b4. Goes bishop c3 first, prepares d4, or queen d2 at some point to attack the pawn on a5. So now bishop c8, d4 was played, because if white tries queen d2 to attack the pawn on a5, now after bishop e6, it's not possible to capture this because of bishop b3 and knight takes, rook a4, and pawns get exchanged. And in case of bishop a5, then just bishop c4 and the bishop hangs on a5. So white choose to play d4 immediately. Now black takes on d4, and we have some exchanges and bishop e6 in the end. And again, bishop a5 is impossible because of bishop c4 and losing the bishop on a5. And if knight a5, then c5 is very nice. And the point is that black's queen also attacks the knight on a5. So if queen doesn't go to d2, if it goes to d3, now rook takes a5 is very nice, and black has two minor pieces for the rook. If it goes to d2, now you can take and take on e4. And also with a4 pawn hanging, it's a really bad position for white. So here Jan chose to play a pass move, to play h3. Usually a very useful move to make some loft for the king. Now Magnus plays c6. Black just wanted to defend the pawn on a5 with c6, and now bishop c2. White wants to create some battery on this diagonal with queen d3 and maybe pushing e5, or just capturing on f6 and playing e5 with checkmating ideas. Now Magnus pulls the trigger and plays d5. Now Nepo chose to play e5, after which we had mass exchanges, dc4, they exchanged queens, and after ef6, bishop b4, exchanging even one pair of bishops. Nepo now took on g7, and we had an exchange on c3. Optically, this endgame looks better for white, since black has double pawns on the c-file, and practically speaking, the queenside majority is not useful because he cannot make a passed pawn on the queenside. On the other side, white has 3 versus 2, and there is a potential to create a passed pawn on that side, but as you will see, it's not enough for white. He took on g7, white goes king f1, and now rook b8, trying to get his rook to b2. So logically, white plays rook b1 here, and now king f6. It's the endgame, so the king, it's natural for king to get closer to the center, closer to the action. Now white exchanges, rook takes, and now rook b1. White offers one more exchange, and now black takes. And it might seem at first that it's a dubious decision, but white doesn't have a way to exploit his extra pawn on the king side, since black's king is very active, and he gets in time to block the king side. Now white tried with king e2, but now after f5, bishop c2, f4, black is successfully blocking the king side. Black is putting some pressure on h3 pawn, so it's hard to push the g pawn. If he tries something like h4, now bishop d5 would be very useful, and after g3, then black can just wait here. Just keep waiting and play just c5, holding f3 square for the king. So he plays this, and now it's obvious that players wanted just to get over with this and finish the game. Now king f3 is not possible because of bishop c6 and capturing the pawn on g2. So after this, white plays f3, trying to limit this bishop. Now these pawns on the king side are not possible to attack. And now black went king f6. Now to stop king g5, he plays h4. Now goes back to e5, king f2, king f6, and now they repeat moves with king e2, king e5, and king f2 back. For example, king f6 and g4. Now black can just wait on this diagonal, and once the bishop leaves the diagonal on which is defending the pawn on a4, now black can just go back to d7 and, for example, bishop e6, bishop d1, bishop d7, and there's no useful move because after you go to h3 with white, there's no g5, and if you push h5, then king g5 is very, very useful, blocking the king side, and the position is totally blocked. This game was not so interesting like the previous one, but I hope that after the rest day, which is tomorrow, we'll have more of interesting games. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day. Goodbye.